Recording. Okay, cool. I'm recording. So today we're going to kind of just get started with the basics of how to do drawings in SolidWorks. Those are
Okay.
those are basically just ways of like taking these parts or assemblies that we make and turning it into like a 2D thing that we can like print out and give to people. Like so with parts, that might be something we can give to a machinist so they can actually make the part for us. Or like with assemblies, they could be useful in kind of just showing people how to build the thing that we designed. Um, So what we're going to do is if you can open up the gear from lesson 6, and then we're going to get started with that. You don't actually have to open it though. Just open SolidWorks and then make a new drawing. And then you should get to a screen that looks like this. And let me know once you're there. So just open SolidWorks and start a new drawing file. And we'll kind of go from there. No, hey Julia. Just letting you know we're doing drawings today. So open up SolidWorks and start a new drawing file. And you should get to a screen that looks something like mine. So let me know once you're there.
Okay. Okay. All right, I'm there.
Cool. Taylor, are you there?
Me too.
Awesome. So quick question. So, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to select a format and size. Uh, do you have only these 5 listed in your box, or do you have more listed?
I have more, and I don't know if I have those.
Good. No,
I also have more.
that's good. So that probably means you have this unchecked. So the drawing format that I have always used is ANSI, ANSI. I've never used ISO. I'm sure maybe if you work for some company or you go to a certain school, they might want you to use ISO, but I have never used it.
Wait, I have a question.
Sure.
So, like, you know how you said I have it unchecked?
Mm-hmm.
It's not unchecked.
Oh, okay. Do you
Is,
still see
is that fine? Yeah, I have what is it, ANSI?
Yeah, they must have just changed it. I have a different version from you guys, so some small stuff might be different. So they might have added ANSI to the standard format list, is possible,
Okay.
which makes sense to me. In general, you're going to just be using ANSI ones. Those are all I've ever used. I'm sure some companies or colleges or stuff like that, they might use ISO, but we're going to use ANSI because that's what I've always used. And as you can see, it kind of lists a couple different options. We don't really ever use portrait, but even with landscape, you can see that we have different sizes. A is the smallest. That's going to be like your standard printer paper, 11 by 8.5. B size, it's 17 by 11, so it's twice as big. And then the next one is 22 by 17, so again, twice as big from the last one. So for now, we're just going to let's start with a B. We'll start with choosing B and C landscape for our format. And we can always change this later if we choose to. But we're going to select that. Does everyone have that option for a format? Or you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Should be right at the top. So I'm going to hit OK. And you can see it pops up. And this is our drawing. And just to give you a couple, so this is like a totally new screen for us now because we've never done drawings before. So totally new screen, a lot of new things to look at. Like when we were working with assemblies and parts, you don't really need to use all these tabs usually. The main ones you'll probably use are view layout and annotation. View layout would be, well, I'll show you guys how to use that right now. So if I click on model view under,
I have a question.
sure.
I don't see a view layout like yours says. It just says drawing, and then it goes right to annotation.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, same for me, same for me.
Really? Okay. that should be all right. So what we'll have to do instead, you know what I'm going to do for next class? I might try to look into how to change that. That's not a big deal though, because all we really use here for the most part, all that we'll use today at least is going to be the model view. So what we can do instead is we can go to insert, drawing view, and then click on model. All right. We can do that instead. Oh, hold on. Drawing view, model. Okay. And this should kind of pop up on the side. Does everyone have this?
Where do you do the insert?
Right up at
'Cause
the top, there should be an insert button where my mouse is. Pretty kind of like along the top.
I don't know, mine says model view, but then there's like nothing in open documents.
That's okay. That's totally fine.
Oh, okay.
Yep, that's all right. I have it in open documents because I actually have lesson 6 gear open in the background. So it's detecting that I have it open and it's saying, oh, hey, do you want to use this file in your drawing? But I'm going to show you guys how to actually look for the files. But you guys both have
Oh, okay.
this little thing popped up without the lesson 6 gear in it.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to click the browse button. And that's going to let us, I don't know if you guys can see the pop-up I just got because I know screen sharing can be kind of weird with Zoom. But when you hit browse, it should open up just your files. And what you're going to want to do is look for the gear part that we used in the last lesson. It should be labeled lesson 6 gear. I'm not sure where you guys saved it, but click browse. It'll open up your files. Then you should click on the file you want to open. For us, we want to open lesson 6 gear. Select it and then hit open. And it'll kind of pop up like this for us. And I'm not going to click yet to set it down, but
So you want us to put it on there?
not yet. Or yeah, go for it. But just so you know, on this side, it has something called preview, which is nice. Because what you can do is when you put it in, this is 2D now, and we're looking at a 3D object. So if you set preview, you can see right now we're kind of looking directly at the face of our gear. We could also look at it from other angles, right? Here's like a top view. Here's a side view, you know? There's a couple different views we can look at, but I'm just going to put down my front view for now. And you should have something that pops up like this. Do you guys all have this?
Yeah.
Okay. So in drawings, the goal is basically to, and that's basically how you would insert your first view. But I guess just to kind of go over the rationale a bit more, the goal of your drawings for parts is going to be, this is something you could give to someone and then they can make this part for you. So kind of by that logic, a couple things you're going to need. You're going to need to give them dimensions, right? You're going to need to make sure every dimension is, kind of remember how like with the parts, we had to give everything dimensions until it was fully defined. Here we kind of have to do the same thing where we need to give everything dimensions until the person who needs to make this part can definitely make this part. So what I'm going to do is, you guys have the annotation tab, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Before that, what I'm going to do is, if we click on our current, or actually, I don't think we need to. If we go to insert again, go to drawing view, and instead click on projected view, what we can also do is we're going to also add a side view. So you can kind of drag it to the right, and it'll add a view to the side, which is nice. Let me know once you have that as well.
I have that.
Awesome. So I'm going to go over a couple like basic rules when you're making drawings. So first off, notice how when we added this second view of our gear, we used projected view. Now, just so you guys know, something you also can technically do is you can insert it through that model view thing that we did originally. And don't do this, but I'm just going to show you what happens if we do that. If I do a side view, you'll see that it looks the exact same, right? But one thing that's different is see how I can move this side view all over the place? The one that we made with projected view, I can only move side to side. I can't move it up and down. It's kind of like linked to this first drawing or to this first view we have, which is good, right? When you're doing drawings, always use projected view if you want to add more views. Don't go into part view or don't go into, insert drawing view, model view. Don't do that because what can happen sometimes is the way SolidWorks works is when you click a view and you add a projected view, it kind of follows a pattern where if you drag to the side, it's going to almost flip it in that direction, right? So you could see we started with our front and we flipped it. Now it's on its side. And then this drawing would now be on its back. If I drag it up to the top, this time it's rotating about a different axis. So it looks like the same view, but technically now we're looking at, instead of looking at the side of it, we're looking at the bottom of it. It just happens to look the same. If we drag it out to the diagonal, we can kind of see like an angled view, which is kind of cool. But it's important to always use projected view because if I were to put like two views side to side and I didn't use projected view, the machinist might not really know what they're looking at. And I'll show you guys examples of this when we get to more complicated parts. With this one, it's not as obvious, but basically if you're adding more views of the same part, always use projected view and make sure they're all linked like this. That's just kind of like a best practice thing. And it's kind of hard to explain why it's an issue now, but as we go on and we do more complicated parts that we're doing drawings for, it'll become obvious that it can get kind of confusing if you're not using projected view. A couple of other things. So there's this useful thing you can do with your drawings. So if we click on the view of our side, like the side view of our gear, you'll see there's a couple different display styles we can use, right? Like if we click this dotted line where it says hidden lines visible, what it does is it shows us almost like, well, I guess it shows us hidden lines. Here we can actually see some dotted lines that actually represent where that square hole is, right? And that can be useful sometimes because that way they can see, oh, this is a side view. The square hole goes all the way through. That's kind of useful, right? So hidden lines can be useful sometimes and giving a little bit more clarity to what the person's looking at. You don't always want to use hidden lines, but in this case, it's kind of helpful because what it's doing is it's showing us, hey, look, this hole goes all the way through the gear, right? If I didn't do these hidden lines, well, maybe the hole actually stops like halfway through. It would be kind of hard to tell with just this view and this view. So here, hidden lines are kind of useful, but you don't always want to add hidden lines. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not. Like I said, this is a pretty basic part. I just kind of want to mention some of these rules so later on when we do more complicated ones, you're not confused as to why I do things a certain way. So let's add our first dimension, right? If you wanted to make this gear, what's a dimension you'd want to know? Anyone have any suggestions for a dimension they would like to know if they had to make this part?
I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue.
Okay.
Like the diameter.
That's fantastic. Yeah, you definitely want to know the diameter of your gear. So we're going to go into annotation and then smart dimension. And from there, we'll click on the outside of our circle. And you can see it actually gives us a couple options to, basically automatically place it in a certain direction that we like. I'll just do this corner. I don't know. Looks good to me. But you also can, move it yourself by hand, right? Maybe you want it going horizontally or maybe you want it going vertically, So I'll do that, I guess. Actually, I kind of like it more at an angle. I'll do it at a slight angle. Pretty much when you're doing these dimension lines, it's not super important their location. It's just important that it's clear, right? You don't want to have like when you're adding more and more dimension lines, it can get kind of confusing. So it's often best to place them in ways where they're not getting like mixed up with other lines, dimension lines. So sometimes you'll be making a part that needs like 20 dimensions. That's a bit much, but maybe even 10 dimensions. You kind of need to be careful about where you're placing them so it's still easy to read. But here it doesn't matter too much where we're placing this 3. We can put it further or closer to the circle, whatever we like. Yeah, diameter is a great one. Anyone else have any suggestions for, or even just you again, Taylor, if anyone have ideas on what other dimensions we'd want to know? I could toss one out there. I know I'd probably want to know how thick the gear is, right? So we can add our thickness here. Right, and that's what kind of why we have our side view, so we can show how thick it is. Another dimension that I'd probably want to know, I'd want to know what size this hole is, right? That's kind of important. So I would want to give them the horizontal distance, also the vertical distance. They would definitely want to know both. Yeah. Cool. Does that make sense? So I'd say this part's probably fully dimensioned for the most part. The one thing you might also want to add potentially is just a dimension to show them that the hole is centered. There is something called GD&T that you can use for that, but that's not something I know a ton about, unfortunately. I might talk to John and see if he wants to run a class on doing drawings, because he probably knows a bit more about them than me, but I can definitely still show the basics. But just to show him that the hole is centered, maybe adding a dimension like this, like from one side of the hole to the center line, we can do. And then from here to here, we could also do, oh, hold on. And then from like, hold on a sec. We could also do a dimension from the horizontal center line and this, and one of the bottom lines of it. So, kind of just showing them that it's centered if we wanted to. Although in some cases like this one, you could already tell the square is centered. It can often be helpful to add the dimensions. Were you guys able to follow along with all that?
No, my like smart dimension, it's like not working. I keep trying to do it and it won't work.
You're not able to do the smart dimensions?
I don't know, it's just not working.
Were you able to do any of them, or just specific ones not working?
I don't know. It's just wait, hold on, give me a second. It's just not letting me delete this one that I messed up, and now it won't let me do.
If you just click on it, you should be able to hit delete on your keyboard, and it should work.
Yeah, I did do that, but it's still not working.
Really?
Yes, it's like doesn't show the delete button.
I'm wondering if you could. Can you right click on it to delete it? Let's see a way to do that. Yeah, I'm not sure. The only way I know how to delete them is with the delete key. Taylor, were you able to get the dimensions to pop up?
Yeah, just one of the ones, like the center of the hole to the edge is just not really like
Is it the horizontal one or the vertical
cooperating.
one?
It's a horizontal one.
This one? Okay. What I would do then is I would select the bottom edge of the square first, and then click the horizontal center line and do it that way.
Oh yeah, it's good now, thank you.
Okay, now it's working.
Awesome. That's good. Yeah, I'll be honest, with the square hole, it's gonna sound silly. I don't think I've ever designed a part with a square hole in the center. So I don't know if this would actually be the best way to dimension this in a part. So if you want to leave the dimensions up for now, go for it. I'm going to delete them just to show you guys another thing you could do. That's kind of helpful. So in SolidWorks, there's also there's a bunch of different annotation features as well. So there are some things like you can add notes, which is helpful. Usually don't want to add notes a ton. Like you shouldn't add notes to do dimensions and stuff like that. Try to keep them to a minimum, but sometimes you need to add a note somewhere. So like maybe on like an assembly, you can add a note somewhere saying maybe, hey, here's like the part number for this if you want to order it. So notes can be helpful if there's stuff you can't convey with dimensions or other annotations and you just want to say it in words. I know one thing I use notes for is like, that in assembly we need 2 gears. Well, I might in a little note do like ×2 in like the bottom corner somewhere, just to kind of tell the machinist that they need to make 2 of these gears, something like that. So that's something notes can be useful for. So a couple other rules when you're doing drawings. So I'm gonna show you a rule I'm basically gonna break a rule and yeah. So we'll just do something real quick. So remember how we did hidden lines on this view? So what I have just done is I have added a dimension to the hidden lines. Like I've used the hidden lines to make a dimension, right? Never ever do that. Whenever you have hidden lines, that should just be for like visual clarification and things like that. Never use hidden lines to do a dimension ever. When we start doing when we do a more complicated part, I can show you other ways of doing it if you need to, but you should never do dimensions with hidden lines. They're only there for the person, getting this drawing to look at and kind of see. Don't use them to add dimensions. So I'm going to delete that. But just wanted
How
to.
do you do the hidden lines again?
Sure. So if you click on the view, there should be a couple different display styles. And if you look, they're right here. So here's the one normally that you would have, which is hidden lines removed. If you click here, you have hidden lines visible.
Oh, okay.
And then you can also like make it like a wireframe, which would basically make the hidden lines solid, which I'm not a big fan of personally. So I'm going to show you guys a couple other things within annotation that's kind of useful. So one thing is a center line, which can be helpful. What that'll do is if you select 2 lines, it'll give you the center line between them. So let's try adding a center line to this to kind of show like just the center of this gear almost. So if I click center line, it's going to say select 2 edges or sketch. It basically gives you a little message telling you how to use it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first select that top line and then this bottom line here. And as you can see, it gives me a little center line. Basically just a little line right between the 2 lines, which can be very helpful sometimes. I can't say it was super necessary there, but why not? So that was kind of useful, I guess. Not very, but that's something you can add sometimes, and sometimes it's very helpful, right? Just to kind of show, hey, these 2 lines, here's the center point of them. Especially like if we had, it's just a good way of showing that things are centered on each other. So they can be useful because if you look, what this kind of center line's telling us is that this hole's probably centered on the gears, right? Which is kind of useful. The other thing we could do is if we wanted to try adding a center line to this little square hole, we can actually see it just lines up exactly with the lines already on the circle, which are called center marks, which basically just tells us that, yeah, our square is definitely perfectly centered on the circle. So I actually might ask input from John on how he would normally dimension this, because I actually don't know how you would. I know you could probably use GD&T for it, but I'm not super familiar with that stuff. So I'm not going to come out and say that this is the best way to dimension this, because I'm not entirely sure how to fully convey that the square is centered. But I might ask John about that because he might have a good idea on that. So let's see, what else is there in the annotation features? So center mark is useful. Whenever you add something that's a circular, it'll usually add it in automatically. But if I delete it, all right, center line, delete. If you want to add a center line, oh, so now you can see the little center lines for the square. But if you ever want to add a center line to it or a center mark to a circle, click center mark, click the outer edge of the circle, and it adds them. But generally, it'll automatically add them when you add the view in. So one last thing that can be useful in these drawings is I'm going to add a projected view to this guy, and I'm going to drag it up and diagonally to kind of make an isometric view. This can be useful a lot of the times because it gives you almost like a 3D view of what the part should look like, right? Because this gives us a front view, this gives us a side view. This kind of gives us a combined view, and it gives you a little more intuition on what this final part's going to look like. And one thing to mention, a lot of times in these drawings, you'll also see a third view because, it's a 3D model. A lot of times you'd see like a top view, side view, and then a front view or something like that. We've only done a front view and a side view just because it's a very simple piece, right? It's just basically a little circle with a hole in it. But for some parts, you would need more views than this. Kind of just
Dan?
what I always so when I did TAing for a class that did drawings, I mean, make sure you're following your rules. Like, don't go too crazy on hidden lines if you don't need them. Or because sometimes they can get very confusing. So be careful with those and make sure you're not dimensioning to them. Be careful to make sure that all of your views are projected after your first view. If you're working with the same model, obviously don't dimension to hidden lines. A couple other things that are kind of more of like a visual thing. Try your best to not have dimension lines cross each other. Like you can kind of see how this one crosses this. The only reason I put it at an angle instead of like this is it kind of hides the center mark, which I don't like very much. So I put it at an angle. But you can kind of see it's now unfortunately crossing that dimension line, which isn't great. Try to avoid that if possible, but sometimes it just happens. And in this case, it's not too bad. Actually, if I put it at more of an angle, that might even help because it makes it more obvious that it's, oh, look at that. Now I can make it without it intersecting any other dimension lines. But try your best to not have your dimension lines cross. It can be tricky sometimes, and sometimes it's not possible. So don't freak out too much. But if you can avoid it, it usually makes your sketch a lot easier to read. Or I'm sorry, your drawing a lot easier to read. Another thing is don't really add dimensions more than once, right? Like I could also define my circumference or the diameter of my circle here, right? Because that would be the height of it. It's the same as if I were to dimension from here to here, right? I could put it there if I wanted to, but I shouldn't, right? Because I already have it here. And sometimes you kind of have to think of it as if you were making this part from this drawing, right? I'd probably rather see the diameter when I see a circle here, because if I see a diameter on a straight line, it makes a little less sense. Does that make sense? I don't know if, like, seeing the diameter here on a circle makes more sense than seeing a diameter here when it's like a side view of it. So those are the major rules that I've kind of gotten drilled into me just from working, because I've made quite a few mistakes on these. Like that hidden line dimensioning thing, I did not know about until I made my first drawing. So my boss was like, oh, you're gonna have to get rid of that. So he was nice about it.
Dan,
Yeah. So,
Dan.
huh?
So I think there's something like wrong with my SolidWorks because it won't let me delete anything.
Okay.
And
You
it
can't.
keeps making like the gears. Like it won't let me like get out.
Oh, try hitting escape.
Oh.
Yeah, when you're stuck, when you're doing your projected views, you have to hit escape to stop placing. Sorry, I should have mentioned that.
Okay.
So one other thing I'm kind of seeing is if we look, we're using up this paper is too big for this drawing, right? Like we have so much extra room. So there's kind of a couple options here. Either we could make our views bigger or we can make our sheet smaller. But if we look, our scale is already 1:1. And a lot of times if you can make your scale 1:1, that's like the best option, because then it's very easy for people to see how big it should be. So instead of making our drawing bigger, I'm going to make our sheet smaller. So what I'm going to do is, if you guys want to follow along on this. So see where it says 1:1 in this bottom right corner here? If we click on that, it should make this little pop-up tab. And then if we click sheet properties after that, we'll see we get to select our sheet properties. And it's actually going to let us change our format if we'd like. We could also change the scale of everything on our drawing. Let's say I wanted to make everything 2:1. It made everything bigger, made everything twice as big. So basically for every 2 inches on this paper, it's going to be 1 inch in real life. But I already said I didn't want to do that. So I'm going to change that back to 1:1. Instead, let's change our sheet properties and we're going to do a smaller sheet. Let's change it to ANSI landscape, ANSI landscape, size A. Apply changes. Cool. And now you can see we're on a much more reasonable size piece of paper. And this would be printer size paper. So, and really just kind of this isometric view, you can drag around freely. That's the only projected view. You can just move around however you want. I usually like to put it in the corner. And don't add any dimensions or hidden lines to your isometric view. Just kind of leave it as is. That's not really meant for you to do any dimensions with. I think on one of the first challenges, I sent out like a drawing that had an isometric view, and that's where all the dimensions were. And I remember John actually sending me a Slack message saying I better not have done that because you don't want to have, don't dimension your isometric views. Those are just for like viewing clarity, I guess you could say, just to see what the part should look like. But I deleted those other dimensions because I think it should be reasonably clear that this square is centered, especially because I added the center lines and they intersect with the center marks. So I might delete those dimensions if I were you guys, because I don't think you need them. And in general, never add more dimensions than you need because they just take up space and add confusion. But I might actually shoot John a text after this or an email asking him how he would do this, because I'm not actually fully sure. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to save this. I mean, one thing we could do is we could always add a note, you know, square hole to be centered. But like I said, usually you want to avoid using notes for that kind of stuff if possible. Try to use dimensions instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this one. And one thing you can do that's kind of useful is it saves this as .drw. But if you ever want to email this to someone, you could also save it as a PDF, right? So if someone maybe doesn't have SolidWorks, you can email it to them and they could just open it up on their computer without SolidWorks. So if you have like a final draft of your drawing and you want to just send it to someone, a lot of times you could just do a PDF. So I'm going to save mine. Cool. And you could see when I save it, the name on the drawing number updates to this, which is kind of cool. And yeah, do you guys want to try doing a drawing for another part? Or do you guys want to head out? I'll let you guys decide today. You guys want to do another small drawing or?
Up to Taylor.
I don't care.
All right, let's try doing one.
You're putting me on the spot, Julia.
All right, well, I have that all saved, so I'm going to open up. Oh, and one thing to mention. So when you're if you're sending a drawing as the .drw file instead of as a PDF, it works kind of like assemblies where what's going to happen is SolidWorks, when it opens this drawing, what it does is it looks for the part and then adds the views in. So what that means is if you sent me just your drawing, I wouldn't be able to open it. Kind of like how if you send me just your assembly, I wouldn't be able to open it because I need the parts that go with it. Just so you guys know. So if you wanted to ever send a drawing to someone, you would either want to do a zip file with the parts that are in your drawing, or you would want to just save it as a PDF and send it that way. Just so you guys know.
I have a question.
Sure.
Could you not just like screenshot it and then send it to the person?
You could, but I'd say it's probably better to send it as a PDF.
Okay.
It's kind of like if you ever like, you know, if someone wanted like you to write them a report on something, you wouldn't write it in Microsoft Word and then screenshot it to them, you know? I mean, like if someone on the robotics team's like, hey, I need you to do something real quick on a drawing, you know, and they just maybe want to see what you have going on, and you send them a screenshot, that might be okay. But, you know, even on robotics, if like, you know, you're having John make you a part or someone make you a part, you know, you probably want to send them a PDF, or better yet, they probably want you to actually print it. But just, you know, for robotics, I'll have to ask them. But the thing is with size B, like that's just bigger paper. I don't know if we can print out size B drawings. So you guys actually may be stuck with only doing drawings in size A. In which case you would just have to make sure you're picking an appropriate scale where everything fits on the page. But I can try talking to Mr. Cormier about that as far as what kind of paper we would have, because size A is pretty good most of the time, but sometimes if you're doing like really big parts that are kind of complicated, trying to scale them down too far makes it really like hard to see all the details. So let's do one more quick drawing, I think. And we'll do it in A ANSI landscape this time. What I actually might do is I might just get this started, and then I might leave it as a challenge for you guys to try to finish it. And then we can kind of review it the next class just to see. We'll see how much time we want to put into it. But once I open my new drawing, I'm going to insert drawing view model. Oh, insert drawing view model. Oh, I forgot. When you start a new drawing, it actually model view is already popped up for you. So you don't actually need to do anything. You can just click browse down here. And I think for this one, I'm going to do I don't know. I'm not sure what one I want to do. I might do the axle. I think the axle is a cool one. I'm going to open up the axle. And what's actually really cool is when you do your first model view, I think it automatically lets you do projected views as well. So I'm actually going to do that, where I'll do a projected view going upwards. So this is my front view. So this would be my top view here. I'm also going to add in an isometric view. So let me know when you guys have that, or if you have any questions, also let me know.
I'm good.
You're good? Awesome. How about you, Taylor?
I'm good.
Awesome. So, and you were able to get all these views?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So, and you can see again, saw a circle, automatically gave us a center mark. SolidWorks is very nice to us. So with this kind of feature, I'm going to show you. So there's something called, have you guys ever heard the term of a datum? You ever heard that term?
No.
No, it's okay.
No.
Yeah, totally fine. I didn't really hear it until like, I think sophomore year of college, so don't worry about it. Pretty much what that means is a datum would be like a point of reference. So just to give you an example, if I were to choose this line here as a datum, what that would mean is, here, I'll show you what that means. So let's say I do a dimension from my bottom line to this middle line here. And then I do another one from this bottom line to this top line. This would be called using I think it's called like datum dimensioning or something like that. But basically the idea is we're using this as a datum or a reference point. As you can see, both of our measurements are based off this line, right? Our 0.5 inches is from this line to this line. Our 1 inch is from this, again, same starting line, but up to the top line up here. So that's basically the idea of a datum, which is you're pretty much just picking one kind of reference point for your dimensions. Obviously, if we were doing side-to-side dimensions, we couldn't choose this line here because it's, going horizontally. So we'd probably have to pick one of these side lines here. But the idea of a datum is just to kind of keep a consistent point of reference. And then if someone wants to know the distance from this line to this line, they would just have to do the math. So they would do 1 inch minus 0.5 and see that this is 0.5 inches. What you definitely shouldn't do, though, is don't do something like this, right? Kind of like how before how I said don't give extra dimensions. Don't do this, right? Because if you gave them the inch and the half inch, they could calculate that this was half an inch, right? So don't add in the extra dimensions if you don't have to. And usually you shouldn't have to. Because I know sometimes it's tempting, oh, I want to save them the math or save them the work, but in a lot of cases, giving a lot of dimensions, give them enough dimensions where you can make the part, but sometimes if you add too many, it can just get really confusing and sloppy. So I'm a big fan of this, although if you'd rather, You could also do it this way, I suppose, where you do 0.5 and 0.5. But usually, it's better, from what I've learned, it's better if you just pick one reference point and measure everything from that. So this is how I would recommend dimensioning this. Then as far as everything else, so another thing we could do is we can give, I don't know, what do you guys think is left to do? I think we could just finish this one off and then call it a class because it'll probably only take a minute or two more. What other dimensions do you think I should add? Right now I just have these two lengths. So I gave them the length of the circular piece and the length of the square piece.
Like the width of it.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Yeah, so we could add the width here. Yep. Yeah, I think adding the width there is a good idea. What else do we need to give them?
For just that piece?
Yeah, for just this piece here. Yep.
Oh, I don't know.
So far, what we've given them is we've given them our heights and stuff, and we've also given them the width of this line here. Now, I mean, I guess like strictly speaking, you could say like, I don't know. I guess you could technically say that, you know, you probably could figure out that if this is a square based on it being in a circle and stuff, but I would probably, actually what I would probably do is I would do something like this, where I would do, oh, that's interesting. Hold on. Yeah, so I think what I might do is something like this. And then I might also give the dimension of the circle up here just to kind of clarify. Although that might actually fall into the thing I was saying about doing more than one dimension for the same thing. Yeah. Yeah, I'll be honest. Doing the drawings is my specialty, so I do plan on asking John if he wants to teach one of these classes. With this one, I was mainly just hoping to, my goal with the drawings is more to teach you guys the options and the features of drawing. So I'll be honest, some of these things that I'm teaching you, like as far as like these actual drawings that I'm making, it's very possible they're not the best way to draw them. So I do plan on asking John if he wants to do one of these because he probably knows a bit more about making good drawings than me. So, because
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the point of a drawing if you can just make the model?
Yeah, generally what happens is like, let's say you make a part. These drawings are really for people making them. So like if I need this axle made by someone, like sure, sometimes like a lot of times in robotics, we're dealing with things that we can buy. But like, let's say we had like, let's say we needed someone to just make a part for us, whether it's on the CNC or maybe they need to like mill it, something like that, right? Someone needs to machine a part. These drawings are basically a way of you basically just be able to, you can print out a piece of paper, give it to them, and they can use that when they're making it as reference instead of having to have like a laptop open with your drawing and checking all your dimensions, or a laptop open with your part. This is almost like it's almost like, you know, like when you're building a Lego set, you know, I could just give you a picture of the Lego set, but it's usually easier if I gave you instructions. Or like, I guess if you're ever like building furniture, you know, I could just give you a picture of what it should look like at the end, but kind of having some diagrams and labels can help too. This is just a way for, the goal of a drawing is, and this is kind of important to understand because I think it helps you when you're making a drawing. The idea is you want to be able to just give someone a paper, have them look at it and say, cool, I'll make this for you. You know, so your goal should really be give them all the dimensions they need to make it, right? So like if I'm making a drawing for someone, I don't want to leave out a dimension, right? Make sure that you're giving them all the information they need to make the part. But also make sure everything's clear and organized and makes sense. So if you're ever like making a drawing, you're like, oh man, this is kind of confusing. You should probably look for a better way to make it. Because I know whenever I'm doing drawings, I always look at it from the view of like, if someone gave me this paper and I had no idea what I was making, could I make this part? And from looking at this, I could confidently say, like, I'm not very good at machining, but so I might not be able to make this part well. But if someone gave me this information, I could probably make them this part. Probably not as well as John could, but I could certainly give it my best shot, because I know how long each of these segments are. I see that it's 0.25 inches wide. And, kind of from up here, I could see it's a 0.25 inch square. And then the actual diameter of this little shaft piece is 0.25. So I think I could definitely make this part, and that's kind of the goal of these. It's something that you can print out and give to someone. Because in a lot of cases, like if you're ever working as an engineer, you're not going to be able to email your part file to one of the machinists because usually they won't have a computer to run CAD with them. What you have to do is you have to print out almost like a blueprint, one of these drawings and give it to them. So that is a good question though. And I think it's definitely important to realize what the point of it is, because I know I will say one of the biggest mistakes I see with these is a lot of times people will either put dimensions in spots where it doesn't make sense. Like kind of going back to that gear drawing we did, it wouldn't have made sense to do the diameter on this line. It probably makes more sense to put the diameter on the circular part of it. Like it's saying the same thing, but it's more obvious here. And also make sure you're giving them all the information they need to make the part. So you don't want them to have to guess about anything. So now, does that make sense? But yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. I think, no, it was a really good question. I think it's definitely important to think about that because I myself am not the best at drawing. Because I know at school I didn't learn a ton about them. Like pretty much what I've taught you guys is everything I learned at school. Like this is all I learned. And there's a lot more stuff you need to know. And some of those rules I was telling you about, like, oh, you can't do hidden lines. I did not learn that. So I think it's definitely important it's a very important skill to know, but I'm also definitely not the best at it, which is why I'd like to try to get John to do one for you guys because I'm still quite new to it myself. So, but did you guys have any other questions?
No, I'm good.
No.
Yeah, both of these parts were, I'd say, relatively simple in the sense that we only really needed 2 views to do all our dimensions. Sometimes though, you might need a 3rd view. It can happen. I might try to make a part for the next class where we actually need 3 views. We'll see. But yeah, till then, that's all I had. So I'm gonna stop recording.